everyone, this is Mrs. Estes. I want to talk to you about your child's homework on Tuesday, which is called Find the Greater Fraction. So we're really just looking more at least common multiples and then greatest common factors in our last little section of our fraction unit. We've already worked with these a lot, but we're just kind of showing alternative ways to find them. So on the first part, they're finding the least common multiple, which we talk with the kids. When we're looking at fractions, the least common multiple is the least common denominator. They're the same thing. So here, they have them actually listing out multiples. So for example, if we're trying to find it for 3 and 5, we would list out our multiples of 3, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, and 5, 5, 10, 15, 20. Now, my students know we usually just start with 4 multiples of each, and then if we haven't found a common multiple yet, then they'll just keep going, so until they find one. So in this case, the least common multiple is 15. So that's one way that they can do it. I'm going to show you another way. It's called the ladder method. It's kind of one of those little math tricks that just can help if they're struggling with their multiples, or if it's really helpful if you're working with larger numbers, but I can show you on this. So if I have 4 and 6, I want to put them in what we call a step. So think of a ladder has steps. So I'm going to put 4 and 6 in a step, and I want to pull out a common factor, something I can divide both 4 and 6 by. I know I can divide them both by 2, so 4 divided by 2 is 2, and 6 divided by 2 is 3. So now I'm left with 2 and 3. Now they do not share a common factor, so I know I'm done. If they did share a common factor, and we don't use 1 because otherwise you just end up with 2 and 3 again, but if they did share a common factor, then I would just draw another step and take out that factor and just keep dividing it out. But in this case, I know I'm done, so my students know to look for the least common multiple. We call it the big L, and they multiply these up. So 2 times 2 is 4, times 3 is 12. So our answer there is 12. Like I said, they could easily do multiples as well. This is just really helpful when we get into larger numbers. And whichever they prefer is fine. So that's what they're doing here. And then down here on question 2, they're using the least common multiple to find equivalent fractions, which we did this in class on Monday, so the kids should be very familiar with this. So they could either use the ladder method, or they could use multiples, and they could find the least common multiple and change them into equivalent fractions. So for example, if I have 5/8 and 2/3, they could do, I'll show you in the ladder method actually, if they don't have a common multiple. So 8 and 3, there's nothing I can take out, so I just multiply them together. And I find that my least common multiple is 24. So I have something 24ths and something 24ths. And this is our equivalent fractions. How did we get from 8 to 24? Times 3, what you do to the bottom, you do to the top. 3 times 5 is 15. So 5/8 is equivalent to 15 24ths. And then same down here, how did I get from 3 to 24? Times 8, what you do to the bottom, you do to the top. 2 times 8 is 16. So I can easily see that 16 24ths is bigger than 15 24ths. So I want to show the bigger fraction. So I would say 5/8 is less than 2/3. And we want to try to remind them to always go back, because we're actually comparing these two fractions, the more simplified versions of those. That's what they're doing there. And then on the back, they are doing the same thing, but just in word problems. So Matthew read 2/3 of a book, Craig read 4/5. Who read more? So we're finding our least common denominator, changing them into equivalent fractions, figuring out a name, who actually read more, and then how much more, finding the difference between those two. And there's a similar question on 4. And then for us, B is going to be the bonus. And I also wanted to show you another resource that our students have been working with here at school. And you can actually access this on the Math Learning Center website that is linked on our S'more each week. So if you click on that, Then you'll click on resources at the top and math apps. And when you do that, you find an app, and I know this isn't going to be super easy to see, but you find an app called Fractions. And the kids know how to do this. So for example, if they were to find 5/8 and 2/3, they could make a fraction bar with 8s, and they could shade 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then another fraction bar with thirds, and let's see, they were shading 2 of those. So thirds, I would make those purple, 2. They can kind of manipulate these and see, okay, those are not the same. I already know that 2/3 is going to be more, but I may want to find a common denominator to help me. So they could use that ladder method, or they could kind of mess around with these until they found that 20/4 fits evenly on top of that, and it fits evenly here as well. And then they can count, they can write on it. So 5/8 is equal to 15 20/4. The only thing is then they have to get out of that to switch it over. And then we can see it's just, and even if you want to layer them on top, I can see it's just one more for the other one. So if that one was 15 20/4, then this one would be 16 20/4 for this one. And I can see that this is the bigger fraction as well. So they can do all of this. There's a web-based app, so you just click on the Fractions app, web-based, and once again, that's in the Math Learning Center. So that's a great resource for them to use if they're needing a little bit more of a concrete picture to help them with that. If you have any questions, just let us know.